Hello everyone, it's Firelord and I'm bringing you my first speed paint walkthrough. So as you can see on the screen, I am drawing, books basically. I wanted to practice my hand at some game UI art basically, or like assets art. And as you see mostly on my YouTube page, it consists of mostly creature and animal designs. So I wanted to try something completely different and, outright unusual than what I'm used to. I mean, before I started this project, I did use someone else's little book designs as practice, and so I worked on some sketches and paintings to try to figure out exactly what I was doing before, going off on my own and making my own book designs. So, to start off, as you can just faintly see in the background, there is a sketch back there, and I personally almost always do a paper sketch for all my digital stuff. It's just faster for me, and I don't know. I don't know how many years I've been doing digital, but I could just not get into doing digital based sketches. To be honest, I feel like it's partly a mixture of the tactile feel of paper. I just prefer it, so to speak. Even when it comes to things like books, I have like a ton of books I got for free on my Kindle, but I barely read them compared to the books that are actually paper that I will obsess over. So I think I'm just a really, really tactile person. Another part of it too, I feel, is the fact that I am using a Wacom Intuos. I don't know the technical term. Wacom has like 5 generations of Intuos now, so I'm not sure which is the new one, but I got mine's like 4 years ago. So it might be much different than the ones you find on their website. But the Intuos, unlike the fancier tablets, which has a screen on it, you have to stare at your computer while your hands are down here looking or drawing on the tablet, which means there's a disconnect between what your eyes are looking at and what your hands are doing. So when it comes to having the actual paper sketch up, I don't usually record this because it's kind of boring to watch, but it's usually something as simple as, if I'm at home, I'll just scan it. Make sure the scanner scans in black and white, because for some reason, if you don't specify that, for my scanner, it tries to add like the faintest of faintest colors, like this very faint yellow over everything, and it's really weird, but whatever. But if I'm at home, I scan it, or if I'm at school like I am now, I'll just take a picture of it, send it to myself, open it up in Photoshop. Usually the only thing you have to do is you might have to crop out the actual paper part so that you don't have like whatever was in the background when you took the picture. And then after that, you're going to want to go to levels and basically adjust that until the paper is as white as possible without the sketch completely disappearing. For this one though, I really didn't do that too much because my work process was a bit different with this little project than it usually is. Usually I'll keep the sketch layer up, but it's like super faint, so I kind of need the paper to be white. But yeah, you're gonna want the paper part to be as white as possible while not losing all of that black line art and stuff. Now, speaking of line art, as you've seen in this video, I am lining my books. And now the thing about that is I usually really hate doing line art. Like, I don't mind doing it traditionally, and I think that just goes back to that whole tactile thing. And when I've used the Cintiq, I have done line art before, and I don't mind doing line art on the Cintiq. So I think, once again, my main reason I don't like doing line out art comes back to using the Intuos. But with this one, I decided to do line art just because I wanted to use it as a guideline to help me better understand what exactly I'm looking at and what I'm supposed to be painting. Because like I said, I've never really done books before. I practice a bit looking at someone else's book designs, but for the most part, all of this is pretty new to me, so I'm basically used to line art as a guideline for myself. I will say my main difficulties with the line art, besides not really like doing it on Intuos, is that I'm really used to doing more natural shapes, basically, which means everything's not perfect. I mean, if you look at your own human body, there's not really much perfect about it. There's no real straight lines, there's no perfect edges, there's no nicely rounded circles or whatever. So that was my main problem with line art. Rita's assignment was creating straight lines, which is pretty easy enough in Photoshop, and circles. And while I know there's Photoshop tools to do that, something in my brain told me no. And I guess it's because since I was mostly doing this for fun and for practice, I was more interested in actually trying to see how much I could do drawing out everything than using the tools. Now, if I was doing this for a client or something, I would definitely use tools because, as you can see throughout this, there's quite a few things that are just off about some of the books and whatnot, or the circles, because I decided to just eyeball things instead of using straight lines and circles and whatnot. Now, on to color. When it comes to choosing and applying color, I have a little file saved on my computer that contains a whole bunch of color palettes, usually used for people who do, what's it called? Cell shading. But the colors work very well too, still for digital painting. So I'll open that up, look around, see what colors look nice. And for these books, because I said I was mostly doing this for fun, I wanted things to be a bit kind of random. So I pretty much just went down the list of colors to try out the different colors and see how they turned out and whatnot. I'm really glad I did that instead of trying to like focus too much on one thing, like, oh, this book is dark and magic looking, let's make it black. Or this book has a plant on it, let's make it green or brown or some silly stuff like that. Like you'll see that I made the little spider web green, and it turned out very interesting looking in my opinion. I really liked the way that book came out. Now, applying the color, it's as simple as just getting the lasso tool, and you basically select around the book or whatever the object might be, and you Alt backspace on the Windows computer. So I could not remember for some reason what computer I actually used. That's amazing. Anyways, you Alt backspace on your computer, and whatever is your chosen as your foreground color becomes that selection's color. So it's extremely easy, and I cut this part out because I was only really recording every other session, but there's a little gradient I add to things, and that gradient really helps you figure out the shadows and lighting. It's a super simple shadow, but it helps you figure out where everything is coming from. So what I do is I take the flats layer, duplicate it, I lock what is it? I think it's lock transparency is what that's called, which basically means you cannot color outside of whatever is actually filled in. So after that, you take the eraser tool, you erase the color from that new layer, and then you take your magic wand tool, and what I do is I select each book one at a time. I select one book, and then I get the gradient tool, and it is I can't remember what it's called, the horizontal gradient. I choose a horizontal gradient, have the opacity at 33%, and I just basically move it up. In the case of these books, I move it up, and it creates a very basic gradient. I might do it one or two more times, depending on how I feel how dark the book should be. But yeah, super simple shadow that tells you basically, the light is coming from above and it gets darker as you go down. That's it. It's all you really need to know once you start getting into painting things. And, if I wanted the light to come from the side, I would change the gradient into a different direction. Super simple. So after the gradient, we go on to the highlights layer, which is basically just applying light. I will definitely say that my biggest difficulties with this one is just trying to understand how lighting works on a on books of this nature. I mean, a book is just a rectangular prism or whatever. I don't remember the actual names of forms and objects. I just know how to draw them. But I mean, the book should be easy enough to shade, but when it comes to books with a bunch of different decorations and whatnot, the main thing I was trying to remind myself as I was painting was think about if an object is raised, and if it is raised, how much from the surface of the book is it raised, or if it's embedded, and if it is embedded, how much from the surface of the book is it embedded. And of course, based off of that, that would affect how the light would shine down on that object. And then not only that, it would also affect what gets hit by light and what gets blocked by light. Like some objects, it has light surrounding the entire embedded object because, like I said, it's embedded. Other objects, I might not put any or very little lighting at all because it's being blocked by a raised part of the book. And so this was something new for me. Natural forms do, of course, have parts of the body that are, either raised like muscle or sunken in like, say, the crevice of your elbow. But the thing with that, I guess for me personally, is that as someone who's drawn creatures for most of her life, it's easier for me to figure stuff like that out on a natural object than on something as precise, something so man-made as a book, basically, especially when it comes to shiny objects, which in my brain, I just assumed that all the books were shiny. I know there's letter-bound books. I have two faux letter sketchbooks, but for some reason when I was actually drawing these books, I either on my mind, I'm either painting letter or I'm painting some kind of metallic-like object on the book. So before I do move on to shadows, I will mention that for the light layer, all it is a simple, very, very faint yellow. Not white, yellow. Very faint yellow, and it is on overlay. Sometimes I'll change the opacity, but in this case, I decided not to. But after the light layer, we move on to shadows, of course. And shadows is, for this project anyways, is as simple as just making dark areas opposite the direction of the light areas. So my shadow layer is simple multiply layer with black. Sometimes I might not use black, I might use like an 80% black of a color. I think for this one, I thought about doing that at first, but then I was like, nah, I'll just use the same shade of black for everything just to make it easier. So, like I said, that's as simple as just doing things in the opposite direction of where the light is for the most part. The main thing that was going through my mind though while doing this was trying to think about, what's embedded. Things that are embedded, how does shadow sit on top of and around embedded objects, and then how does shadow sit on and around objects that are raised. But yeah, there's some parts though I realized as I worked that I outright missed that. Like some parts I'll sit there and I'll be like, I feel like this area needs a shadow, or I feel like I should go back and add extra highlights here, but I'm not exactly sure why or how. And like I said, that just goes back to not being really familiar with this subject, basically, for lack of a better word. So at the end of the shadow layer, which almost always takes the longest for me no matter what I'm painting for some reason, but after the gradient layer is done, I create a new layer with on overlay, and once I'm done with that layer, it will be put down to 33% opacity about. And I get the brush tool, I make the color fully white, and I just start adding shine. And it's not necessarily always shine. I guess another good word for this layer would be just details. So like for the metal gets a nice, shine over it. I just did some simple not really cross hatching because there wasn't really a lot of hatching, just a lot of diagonal lines, but I'll just use the word cross hatching for now. So I just do a lot of cross hatching on the metal, for example, to show that it's metal and it's shiny. And then on the letter kind of has like random spots of white to show that texture and detail on the letter and show that there's light that's bouncing off of the letter. I didn't add too much shine on like the book part itself, I guess. I can't really think of the terminology I want to use. Like I mostly added the shine layer on the little accessories that are on the books. Usually when it comes to, I don't like to use a lot of shine, which is kind of the main reason I didn't want to add too much on the books themselves, because I feel like way too much shine gets distracting. You just want to add enough to tell people what they're looking at. Like I said, you put some shine on the metal, people see, oh, it's metal. You put some bits of some little dots and lines on the letter so that people look at it and they can see, oh, it's some kind of leather or fabric like material. So this isn't shown in the video because, like I said, I didn't want the video to be too long, but I kind of do the same finishing touches for almost all my pieces just because it's something I did many, many, many years ago, and it just works, so I still do it. But basically, once I review everything and I'm good, and I walk away from the picture for a bit and come back to it, so I'm 99% sure it's good, because it's always good to walk away from your artwork for a bit and come back and look at it with a fresh eye. But after I've confirmed everything, I sometimes delete the sketch layer, but basically I select all the layers, I duplicate them, I merge those duplicates together into one layer. I go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I put it on about 10, which is a super strong blur. And then I put that layer onto an overlay layer, and then I change down the opacity of that overlay layer. And what it does is it's basically a color correction in a way. I just do it because I like the way things look. I like the strong, harsh colors. And I just changed the opacity based off of how strong I want those colors to be, or how subtle I want those colors to be. What I've started doing new though is I started duplicating that new layer, that overlay layer, and I changed that overlay layer to a multiply. And then I changed the multiply down to like a really low opacity. And why I do that is because I really like that subtle darkness that the multiply layer adds. Most times I don't really use the multiply layer. I only just now starting doing this recently, but I really do like I said, that really subtle darkness it adds. So that pretty much wraps up this video. If y'all enjoyed it, please leave a like and feel free to share to all your social medias. And tell me if this inspires you to go out and start painting books, whether digitally or traditionally. Because I'll be honest, something about painting these books was oddly relaxing. Even though part of me was kind of annoyed because, like I said, I had no idea what I was doing. It seemed a good majority of the time because it's like, who paints books? But whatever. Thanks for watching, y'all, and I'll see you later.